They say a woman's worth is measured by what she can give. Tonight, Lena Moore learned her price. Nothing. Cast out like garbage on the coldest night of the year, clutching divorce papers that still smell like her husband's cologne and contempt. No coat, no money, no future. Just a bench at an empty bus terminal and the numbing realization that she'd been reduced to a single brutal word: barren. But when three small faces appeared through the fog of her despair, followed by a man whose eyes held their own grief, everything changed. This is the story of how the unwanted became irreplaceable. Before we begin, if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it touches your heart, hit that like button. Now let's dive in. The bus terminal smelled like industrial cleaner and defeat. Lena Moore sat on the third bench from the entrance, her body folded in on itself like a letter no one bothered to open. Her fingers, pale, trembling, gripped the envelope containing her divorce decree so tightly that the paper had started to tear at the edges. She didn't notice. She barely noticed anything anymore except the cold. The cold was everywhere. It seeped through the thin fabric of her blouse, crawled up her spine, settled in her chest where her heart used to be. December in the city was unforgiving, and tonight the temperature had dropped below freezing. She'd checked the digital display above the ticket counter before the attendant had locked up for the night, 28 degrees Fahrenheit. That was an hour ago. Now she was alone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the empty terminal look like a stage set for despair. A crumpled fast food bag tumbled across the floor, pushed by the draft from the automatic doors that opened and closed at random intervals, triggered by ghosts or glitches. Lena watched it roll past her feet and felt a kinship with that piece of trash, discarded, purposeless, waiting to be swept away. "You're worthless to me now." Marcus's voice still echoed in her head, sharp and clear as the moment he'd said it 4 hours ago. She'd been standing in their kitchen, his kitchen now, she supposed, staring at the granite countertops they'd picked out together 3 years ago when they'd still believed in forever. She'd been chopping vegetables for dinner, something normal and domestic, when he'd walked in with his lawyer. His lawyer. She should have known then, should have seen it coming. But Lena had spent 6 years perfecting the art of not seeing things that would hurt. "The medical reports confirm it," Marcus had continued, his tone clinical, detached, like he was discussing a faulty appliance. "You can't have children. You've known this for 8 months, and you kept trying to convince me there was still hope. You wasted my time, Lena. You wasted years of my time." The lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia something, had slid the papers across the counter, right next to the half-chopped carrots and the knife still in Lena's hand. "Mr. Moore is prepared to offer you a very reasonable settlement," Patricia had said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "Given the circumstances, I'd advise you to sign." The circumstances. As if Lena's body's betrayal was some kind of crime. As if the diagnosis of premature ovarian failure she'd received last March was evidence of fraud. "I want you out tonight," Marcus had added, checking his watch like she was making him late for something important. "I'm having the locks changed in the morning." "Sign the papers, pack what you can carry, and go." "Marcus, please." Lena had started, but he'd cut her off with a look so cold it had stolen the words from her throat. "I'm 34 years old. I want a family, a real family. You can't give me that." He'd paused, and for just a second something had flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or the ghost of who he used to be. Then it was gone. "I've already moved on, Lena. Jenna's pregnant. 3 months. We're getting married as soon as this is finalized." The knife had clattered from Lena's hand onto the cutting board. Jenna, his assistant. The pretty 26-year-old with the perfect teeth and the way of laughing at all his jokes. The one Lena had defended when her sister had made a passing comment about how close they seemed at the company holiday party. "Don't be ridiculous," Lena had said back then. Marcus would never. Except Marcus would. Marcus did. And apparently, Marcus's affair had been fruitful in every way Lena could never be. She'd signed the papers with shaking hands. What else could she do? She had no money of her own. She'd quit her teaching job 2 years ago when Marcus insisted she focus on getting healthy and preparing for motherhood. She had no family nearby. Her parents had retired to Florida, and her only sister lived in Seattle with her own problems. She had friends, but they were mostly Marcus's friends' wives, women who'd probably already heard some twisted version of this story. She'd packed a single suitcase, clothes, toiletries, a framed photo of her grandmother, the only person who'd ever told her she was enough just as she was. Then she'd walked out of the house she'd called home for 4 years and into the freezing night. The taxi had cost her the last of her cash. She'd asked the driver to take her to the bus terminal because it was warm and public and she didn't know where else to go. She'd thought maybe she could figure something out, call someone, make a plan. But when she'd gotten here and sat down and really tried to think, her mind had just stopped. Everything was static and cold and impossible. A burst of wind rattled the terminal's glass doors, and Lena pulled her arms tighter around herself. She wasn't wearing a coat. It was still hanging in the hall closet at Marcus's house, and she'd been too numb, too shocked to remember it. Now she was paying the price. Her teeth chattered. Her lips had gone numb. How long does it take to freeze to death, she wondered distantly. Is it painful, or do you just get tired and fall asleep? She'd read somewhere that hypothermia made you feel warm at the end, that people found frozen outside were often partially undressed because the dying brain misfired and convinced them they were overheating. Would anyone find her before morning? Would anyone care? The thought should have scared her, but instead it just felt inevitable. Worthless? The word wrapped around her like a shroud. Because if she was honest, really, brutally honest, Marcus hadn't said anything that wasn't true. What was a woman who couldn't have children? In a world that measured female value by fertility, what was she? She'd spent 8 months asking herself that question. 8 months of appointments and tests and procedures. 8 months of watching Marcus's hope turn to frustration, then frustration to contempt. 8 months of feeling her body fail her in newer and more humiliating ways. The final diagnosis had been clear: premature ovarian failure. Her ovaries had simply stopped. At 32 years old, her body had decided it was done. No eggs, no hormones, no hope. The doctor had talked about donor eggs and surrogates and adoption, but Marcus had gone silent during that conversation. She'd known then, really known, that it was over. She just hadn't expected it to end quite so viciously. A sob built in Lena's chest, but she swallowed it down. She was done crying. She'd cried enough over the past 8 months to flood that damn house. What good had it done? Marcus had still cheated. Jenna was still pregnant. Lena was still broken. Worthless. The automatic doors whooshed open again, and cold air blasted through the terminal. Lena closed her eyes, almost welcoming it. Maybe if she just sat here long enough, the cold would make all the decisions for her. She didn't hear the footsteps at first. It was only when a small voice said, "Daddy, that lady doesn't have a coat," that Lena's eyes fluttered open. 3 children stood about 10 feet away, staring at her with the brutal, guileless curiosity of the young. 2 boys and a girl, ranging in age from maybe 5 to 9. Behind them, a man was locking up a coffee thermos and putting it in a backpack. "Noah, don't stare," the man said without looking up. "It's rude." "But she's shaking," the oldest boy, Noah apparently, persisted. "Like, a lot. Like when Evan got locked outside last winter and we had to warm him up with blankets." "I didn't get locked out. You locked me out," the younger boy piped up indignantly. "Did not. Did too." "Boys," the man said, his voice carrying a note of exhausted patience that suggested this argument was well worn. "Not now." But the little girl, she looked about 6, with dark curls and enormous brown eyes, had already taken a step closer to Lena. "Are you okay, miss?" Lena tried to answer, but her jaw was shaking too hard to form words. She managed a nod that was entirely unconvincing. The girl turned back to the man. "Daddy, she's not okay. She's freezing. We have to help her." "Mia, sweetheart." "We have to." Mia's voice took on a tone of absolute certainty. "You always say if someone needs help and we can help them, we should. You always say that." The man, Daddy, finally looked up, and his gaze landed on Lena. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lena saw a tall man in his late 30s, with dark hair that needed a cut and eyes that held the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been running on fumes for too long. He wore jeans and a practical winter jacket. and had the kind of face that was handsome in an understated way. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes that looked like they smiled often, even though they weren't smiling now. What he saw when he looked at Lena, she could only imagine. A ghost of a woman. Someone broken. Someone not worth saving. She waited for him to make an excuse and hustle his children away from the crazy lady on the bench. Instead, he walked closer. "Ma'am?" His voice was gentle, careful. "Are you waiting for a bus? Because the terminal's been closed for the night. Nothing's running until 6 a.m. Lena's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before she managed to whisper, "I know." Understanding flickered across his face, followed by something that looked like concern. He glanced at his children, seemed to calculate something, then crouched down so he was at eye level with Lena instead of looming over her. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "Do you need me to call someone? Police? Ambulance?" "No." The word came out sharper than Lena intended. The last thing she needed was authorities involved, asking questions, calling Marcus. "I'm fine, just cold." "You're not fine," the youngest boy, Evan, announced with the blunt honesty of a 5-year-old. "You're blue." "Evan," Noah hissed. "Well, she is. Her lips are blue." The man, still crouched, still watching her with those careful eyes, unzipped his jacket and started to shrug out of it. "Here, take this." "No." Lena pulled back instinctively. "I can't." "You're in the early stages of hypothermia," he said matter-of-factly, not unkindly. "I can see it. Your extremities are pale, you're shivering violently, and you're having trouble speaking clearly. You need to warm up, now." He held out the jacket. "Please." Something about the please undid her. Or maybe it was the way he said it, not like he was doing her a favor, but like he genuinely wanted to help, like she was worth helping. With trembling hands, Lena took the jacket and wrapped it around herself. It was still warm from his body, and the heat of it against her frozen skin was so overwhelming she almost cried. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded and stood up, though he didn't step away. "I'm Daniel Brooks. These are my kids, Noah, Mia, and Evan." "Hi," Mia said immediately, her smile bright and uncomplicated. "You have pretty hair, even though it's messy right now." "Mia!" Noah looked mortified. "What? She does!" Despite everything, despite the cold and the fear and the crushing weight of her entire life falling apart, Lena felt her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. "I'm Lena," she said. "Lena Moore." "Nice to meet you, Miss Lena," Noah said politely, in the tone of a child who'd been taught proper manners and used them like armor. Do you have somewhere to go?" It was such a simple question, such a reasonable question. Lena's answer stuck in her throat. She watched Daniel's expression shift as the silence stretched on, saw the moment he understood. "You don't," he said quietly, not a question. Lena shook her head. "Family? Friends?" Not nearby, not anywhere I can." She trailed off. How could she explain? How could she tell this stranger that she had nowhere because she'd spent 6 years building a life with a man who discarded her the moment she became inconvenient? That every friend, every connection, every safety net had been tangled up in Marcus's world? Daniel seemed to read between the lines. His jaw tightened and something hard flashed through his eyes. Anger, but not at her. "Daddy," Mia said, tugging on his sleeve. "We can't leave her here." "Mia, it's complicated." "No, it's not." The little girl's voice was surprisingly firm. "She's cold, and she's alone, and it's nighttime. If we leave her here, she could die. You told us about hypothermia. You said it can kill people. We can't let her die, Daddy." Evan nodded solemnly. "That would be bad." Noah, the oldest, looked between his father and Lena with an expression far too serious for a 9-year-old. "She needs help, Dad. Real help." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly wrestling with something. Lena wanted to tell him it was fine, that he should go, that she wasn't his problem, but the words wouldn't come because part of her, a small, desperate, pathetic part, wanted him to stay. Wanted someone, anyone, to stay. "Look, Daniel said finally, his tone careful. I have a guest room. It's not much, but it's warm and it's safe. You could stay there tonight, just tonight. Get warm, get some sleep, figure things out in the morning when your brain isn't shutting down from cold. Lena stared at him. You don't know me. I know you're in trouble. I know you're freezing. I know my daughter's right. I can't leave you here. He paused. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting anything. I can help. So I'm going to. It was insane. Dangerous even. Going home with a strange man and his children, accepting shelter from someone she'd met 5 minutes ago. Every instinct she'd been taught screamed at her to refuse. But what was the alternative? Freeze to death on this bench? Wander the streets until something worse than cold found her? And there was something about Daniel Brooks, something in the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with a straightforward kindness, that made her want to trust him. Or maybe she was just too tired and cold and broken to care anymore. Just tonight, she heard herself say. Relief washed over Daniel's face. Just tonight, he agreed. Come on, my car's parked outside. He helped her stand and she swayed slightly, her legs unsteady. Noah immediately moved to her other side, offering his arm with the earnest gallantry of a child playing at being grown. I got you, Miss Lena, he said. She could have cried at that, at the simple, uncomplicated goodness of it. Instead, she let him and his father guide her toward the exit, Mia and Evan trailing behind, already chattering about who got to sit where in the car. The night air hit her like a slap, but Daniel's jacket helped. So did the warmth of his hand on her elbow, steady and sure. His car was a slightly battered SUV that had clearly seen a lot of family use. There were crumbs on the floor, a forgotten toy in the cup holder, a stack of coloring books in the back. It was messy and real, and somehow the most comforting thing Lena had seen in months. Daniel helped her into the passenger seat while the kids piled into the back, already arguing about whose turn it was to pick the music. No music, Daniel said firmly as he slid into the driver's seat. It's late and we all need quiet. Deal? A chorus of disappointed "Okay, Daddy" followed, but the children settled down. As Daniel started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, Lena stared out the window at the terminal disappearing behind them. She should have been scared, should have been second-guessing this decision, but all she felt was exhausted. Thank you, she said softly, not looking at Daniel. You didn't have to do this. Yeah, he said, his eyes on the road. I did. They drove in silence for a while, broken only by the occasional whisper from the back seat and the hum of the heater slowly thawing Lena's frozen extremities. She watched the city slide past, familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, like she was seeing them from someone else's life. Maybe I am, she thought. Maybe the woman I was died back in Marcus's kitchen, and this is someone else. Someone who gets in cars with strangers. Someone who has nowhere to go but forward. We live about 20 minutes from here, Daniel said eventually, his voice low. Quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but the house is warm and there's food if you're hungry. I'm not, Lena said automatically, though her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. From the back seat, Evan giggled. Your tummy says you're lying. Despite everything, Lena felt another ghost of a smile. We had spaghetti for dinner, Mia offered. There's lots left. Daddy always makes too much. I cook for a small army out of habit, Daniel admitted. Occupational hazard of single parenting. Better too much than too little. Single parenting, so there was no wife waiting at home. No woman who'd take one look at Lena and see competition or threat or judgment. Their mother? Lena asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's too personal. It's fine. Daniel's hands tightened briefly on the steering wheel. She passed away 2 years ago. Car accident. I'm sorry. Me too. He paused. The kids are doing better now. We all are. It's just different. Lena understood different. Different was her entire life now. They fell silent again, and Lena felt her eyes growing heavy. The warmth of the car, the low hum of the engine, the bone-deep exhaustion of the worst day of her life. It all pressed down on her like a weight. You can sleep, Daniel said quietly. We'll wake you when we get there. I shouldn't. You're safe, he said simply. I promise. And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. Lena let her eyes close. It. She woke to a gentle hand on her shoulder and Mia's voice saying, "Miss Lena, we're home." The house was a two-story colonial that had seen better days but was clearly well-loved. The porch light was on, and through the front windows, Lena could see warm yellow light and what looked like a living room full of mismatched but comfortable furniture. Daniel helped her out of the car while the kids tumbled ahead, racing each other to the front door. Her legs were still unsteady, and he kept a careful hand on her elbow as they walked up the path. Inside, the house smelled like pasta sauce and something cinnamon, cookies maybe, or candles. It was cluttered in the way houses with children always are. Shoes by the door, backpacks hung on hooks, a pile of mail on the entry table. It was chaos. It was beautiful. "Boys, take your stuff upstairs," Daniel instructed. "Mia, can you show Miss Lena to the guest room?" "Yes." Mia grabbed Lena's hand with the confidence of someone who'd never been taught to fear strangers. "It's this way. It's my favorite room because it has a window seat and you can see the garden, except right now it's too dark to see anything, but in the morning you'll love it." She led Lena down a hallway and into a small bedroom that was simple but clean. A double bed with a blue comforter, a dresser, a nightstand with a lamp, and yes, a window seat with cushions. "There's a bathroom right across the hall," Mia explained. "And if you need anything, Daddy's room is at the end of the hall and mine is next to his, and the boys share the big room upstairs, but they fight a lot, so sometimes it's noisy." "Mia," Daniel appeared in the doorway, looking slightly exasperated but fond. "Breathe, sweetheart. Give Miss Lena some space." "Okay." Mia bounced on her toes. "But first, do you like pancakes? Because tomorrow's Saturday, and Daddy makes pancakes on Saturday, and they're really good, even though sometimes they're a little burnt." "They're not burnt," Daniel protested. "They're caramelized." "That's what you always say." Despite the weight in her chest, despite everything, Lena laughed, actually laughed. Both Daniel and Mia stopped and stared at her, and Lena realized it was probably the first time she'd made that sound in months. "Pancakes sound nice," she said softly. Mia beamed. "Good. Okay, good night, Miss Lena. I hope you sleep good and don't have bad dreams." She hugged Lena's waist quickly, then darted out of the room, leaving Lena stunned and oddly moved by the casual affection. Daniel lingered in the doorway. "There are towels in the bathroom cabinet if you want to shower, and I'll leave some clothes outside the door. They'll be big on you, but they're clean. Sweats and a t-shirt probably." "You've done too much already," Lena said. "Not possible." He paused. "Look, I'm not going to pry into what happened tonight. That's your business. But if you need to talk or if you need help tomorrow figuring things out, I'm here, okay?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Get some rest," Daniel said gently. "You're safe here." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone for the first time in hours, Lena sat down on the edge of the bed and looked around the small room. It was nothing special, just a guest room in a stranger's house. But it was warm. And for the first time since Marcus had handed her those papers, Lena felt like she could breathe. She pulled the divorce decree from her pocket and stared at it. Her signature looked shaky, desperate. Marcus's was bold and confident, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Worthless. The word tried to rise up again, tried to drag her back down. But then she heard Mia's laughter from somewhere in the house, followed by Noah's voice telling her to brush her teeth. Normal sounds, family sounds, sounds of people who'd taken her in without question, without judgment, without asking what she could give them in return. Lena folded the papers and set them on the nightstand. Tomorrow, she'd figure out what came next. Tomorrow, she'd face the wreckage of her life. But tonight she was warm and safe. And for now, that was enough. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of something burning. For a disorienting moment, she had no idea where she was. The ceiling was wrong. The light was wrong. The sounds drifting up from downstairs, children's voices, the clatter of dishes, someone saying, "Evan, put that down right now," were definitely wrong. Then it all came rushing back. The bus terminal, the cold. Daniel Brooks and his 3 children standing in front of her like some kind of miracle she hadn't asked for. She sat up slowly, her body aching in ways that had nothing to do with the unfamiliar mattress. The divorce papers were still on the nightstand where she'd left them, a reminder that yesterday hadn't been a nightmare. It had been real. Marcus was gone. Her marriage was over. Her entire life had been dismantled in the space of a single evening. And now she was in a stranger's house wearing borrowed sweatpants and a t-shirt that read Bay Area Tech Summit 2023, surrounded by the chaotic sounds of a family that wasn't hers. She should leave. Should thank Daniel for his kindness and figure out her next move. Find a shelter maybe, or call her sister in Seattle and beg for a plane ticket. Something. Anything other than continuing to impose on people who'd already done more than enough. But when she stood and looked out that window seat Mia had mentioned, she saw a garden buried under winter frost, and beyond it, a swing set with 3 swings moving slightly in the morning breeze. It was such a simple scene, so ordinary, and yet it made her throat tight. When was the last time she'd seen a swing set? When was the last time she'd thought about children playing, without that thought immediately turning into a knife of grief over what she couldn't have? A knock on the door startled her. "Miss Lena?" Noah's voice tentative. "Are you awake? Dad says breakfast is almost ready." "Well, he says it's ready, but I think he burned the pancakes again." "I heard that," Daniel called from downstairs. "Well, you did," Noah called back, then lowered his voice conspiratorially. "He totally did." Despite herself, Lena smiled. "I'll be down in a minute." "Okay, the bathroom's across the hall if you need it. There's a new toothbrush in the cabinet. Dad always keeps extras because Evan keeps losing his." Footsteps retreated, and Lena stood there for a moment, marveling at the casual domesticity of it all. She found the toothbrush exactly where Noah said it would be, along with fresh towels and a basket of travel-sized toiletries that looked like they'd been collected from hotels. When she finally made her way downstairs, she followed the sounds of controlled chaos to a large kitchen that was clearly the heart of the home. Daniel stood at the stove, wielding a spatula like a weapon, while Mia set the table with intense concentration. Noah was pouring orange juice into mismatched glasses, and Evan sat at the counter, swinging his legs and narrating everything happening around him. And then Dad flipped the pancake, but it went too high and almost hit the ceiling, but it didn't. It just landed back in the pan, but upside down, and now that side is really, really burnt. "It's not burnt," Daniel said for what was clearly not the first time. "It's caramelized," all 3 children chorused, then dissolved into giggles. Daniel caught sight of Lena in the doorway and smiled, looking slightly sheepish. "Morning. I hope you slept okay." "I did. Thank you." It was true. She'd slept deeper and more dreamlessly than she had in months, exhaustion finally claiming its due. "Good. Sit anywhere, Mia. Is the table ready?" "Almost. I'm putting out the special napkins." "We have special napkins?" Noah looked confused. "We do now. I found them in the drawer. They have flowers on them." "Those are from Easter like 2 years ago," Noah informed her. "So? They're still special." Lena found herself settling into a chair at the kitchen table, watching this family move around each other with the practiced choreography of people who'd learned to function as a unit. Daniel served pancakes that were, in fact, slightly burnt on one side. Mia distributed the flowered napkins with great ceremony. Noah made sure everyone had juice. Evan provided unnecessary commentary on everything. It should have felt awkward. Lena should have felt like an intruder. Instead, it just felt warm. "So," Daniel said once everyone was seated and the initial breakfast chaos had settled into actual eating. "I called my sister this morning. She runs a women's shelter about 30 minutes from here. They have space if you need somewhere to stay while you figure things out." Lena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Of course, he was trying to get rid of her politely. She'd known this was temporary, but somehow hearing the exit strategy laid out so clearly still stung. "That's very thoughtful," she managed. "Thank you." "Or," Daniel continued, and something in his tone made her look up, "you could stay here, just for a few days. A week, maybe. Until you have a real plan." Lena stared at him. "I couldn't possibly." "Why not?" Mia interjected, syrup on her chin. "We have the room and you're really quiet and you don't take up much space." "Mia, that's not—" Daniel started. "It's true," Mia insisted. "And you seem sad, Miss Lena. People shouldn't be alone when they're sad. That's what you always tell us, Daddy." Using my own wisdom against me, Daniel muttered, but his eyes were kind when he looked back at Lena. "She's not wrong, though. Look, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. If you'd rather go to the shelter, I completely understand. But if you want to stay here for a bit, figure things out without the pressure of time limits and intake processes, the offer's genuine. But why? Lena heard herself ask. You don't know me. I could be anyone. You could be, Noah said seriously, but you're not. We're good at reading people. Dad taught us. It's true, Evan added. One time there was a man at the park who seemed nice, but Dad said something was off, and then we saw on the news he was a bad guy who was stealing from people. That's not quite how that went, Daniel said. But the point stands. I've gotten pretty good at assessing character. Call it a necessary skill in my line of work. What do you do? Lena asked, realizing she knew almost nothing about this man who'd taken her in. I run a tech company. Software development, mostly. We design systems for hospitals and clinics, patient management, data security, that kind of thing. He shrugged like it was nothing, but Lena could tell from the way the children perked up that it was something they were proud of. Daddy's company helps sick people, Mia explained. Not like being a doctor, but the computers help the doctors help people. That's a very simplified version, Daniel said, but essentially accurate. A CEO. He was a CEO, and he'd stopped to help a freezing stranger at a bus terminal. The cognitive dissonance made Lena's head spin. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said quietly. Daniel set down his fork and looked at her directly. 2 years ago, my wife died, Sarah. She had the kids with her when it happened. There was an accident on the freeway. A truck lost control. Sarah died on impact. The kids survived without a scratch. The children had gone very quiet, the way children do when adults talk about painful things they're pretending not to hear. For months after, Daniel continued, I was barely functioning. I had help, my parents, Sarah's parents, my sister. But there were days when I couldn't get out of bed and nights when I couldn't sleep, and moments when I looked at my kids and had no idea how to be what they needed. He paused, and Lena saw the shadow of that grief pass across his face. One night, about 6 months after the funeral, I was at a 24-hour diner at 3 a.m. because the house felt too empty, and I couldn't stand my own thoughts. And this waitress, older woman, maybe 60, she saw me sitting there staring at cold coffee, and she just sat down. Didn't ask permission, just sat down and said, You look like you're carrying the world. Want to share the weight? I ended up talking to her for 2 hours, told her everything, and when I finally left, she wouldn't let me pay for the coffee. She just said, Pass it on. When you see someone drowning, throw them a rope. He looked at Lena, and his eyes were steady and honest. So that's what I'm doing, throwing you a rope. No strings attached, no expectations, just help, because I know what drowning feels like. Lena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of these children. She would not. It's okay to cry, Evan said matter-of-factly. We all cried a lot when Mommy died. Crying helps the sad come out. And that simple childish wisdom, broke something loose in Lena's chest. She didn't sob. She didn't fall apart. But tears slid down her face, and she didn't try to stop them. Mia appeared at her elbow with a flowered napkin. Here, for your sad. Lena took it and pressed it to her eyes, overwhelmed by the kindness of these people who owed her nothing. Thank you, she whispered. I'll stay. Just for a few days, just until I figure out what's next. Stay as long as you need, Daniel said simply. And just like that, it was settled. The days that followed developed a rhythm that Lena hadn't expected. She'd wake to the sound of the Brooks household coming to life. Daniel's alarm at 6:30, followed by the thunder of children's feet on stairs, the eternal debate over whose turn it was to shower first, the perpetual hunt for missing shoes and homework and permission slips. At first, she stayed in her room during the morning chaos, not wanting to intrude, but on the third day, she came downstairs to find Evan sitting at the kitchen table in tears, a bowl of cereal untouched in front of him. What's wrong? Lena had asked before she could stop herself. I can't tie my shoes, Evan sobbed. Noah's supposed to help me, but he's in the shower and Mia's getting dressed and Dad's making lunches and I can't do it and we're going to be late and Mrs. Patterson gets mad when we're late. Lena had knelt down without thinking. May I? Evan had nodded, hiccuping, and thrust his sneaker-clad foot toward her. She'd tied his shoes, double-knotted them the way her grandmother had taught her 30 years ago. And when Evan had thrown his arms around her neck and said, "Thank you, Miss Lena, you're the best," something in her chest had loosened just slightly. After that, mornings became a shared endeavor. Lena started making coffee, good coffee, not the sludge Daniel brewed in the ancient machine. She packed lunches while Daniel wrangled children into appropriate clothing. She found lost homework and signed permission slips and made sure everyone had what they needed. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said one morning, watching her efficiently prepare 3 identical sandwiches. "I know," Lena said. "I want to." It was true. For the first time in months, she felt useful, needed, not for what her body could produce, but for what her hands could do and her presence could provide. The afternoons were quieter. Daniel worked from a home office most days, his door closed, the low murmur of conference calls leaking into the hallway. Lena had started cleaning, just little things at first. Dishes, laundry, organizing the avalanche of papers and artwork that seemed to breed on every available surface. "You really don't have to do this," Daniel said again when he found her folding a mountain of clean clothes in the living room. "I'm earning my keep," Lena replied. "You're a guest, not an employee. I'm a guest who needs to feel useful." He'd studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but if it starts to feel like work instead of help, you tell me." "Deal." The evenings were her favorite, though. That's when the whole family was together, and Lena got to see the Brooks unit in full operation. Dinner was always an event. Daniel cooked, sometimes well, sometimes disastrously, and the children set the table and everyone talked over each other in a way that should have been overwhelming but was actually oddly soothing. They told stories about their days. Noah talked about his science project on volcanoes. Mia described the elaborate game of pretend she'd orchestrated at recess. Evan recounted in excruciating detail everything his kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had said, done, or worn. And they asked Lena questions. "What's your favorite color?" Mia wanted to know. "Did you have pets when you were little?" from Noah. "Can you do a cartwheel?" Evan asked. "Because I'm learning and it's really hard." Simple questions. Child questions. Questions that had nothing to do with fertility or failure or worth. Lena answered them all and slowly, carefully, began to remember who she'd been before Marcus, before the diagnosis, before everything had fallen apart. She'd been a teacher once, 4th grade. She'd loved it, the chaos, the curiosity, the way children saw the world as full of possibilities instead of limitations. "Why'd you stop?" Noah asked one night when she mentioned it. Lena hesitated. Daniel's eyes found hers across the table, giving her an out if she needed it. But maybe she didn't need it. "I was married," she said carefully. "And my husband wanted me to focus on other things, so I quit." "That's dumb," Evan announced. "If you like teaching, you should have kept teaching." "Evan," Daniel said warningly. "Well, it is. You always say we should do what makes us happy." "It's more complicated than that when you're an adult," Lena said gently. "Why?" Mia asked with devastating simplicity. Lena didn't have a good answer for that. Later, after the kids were in bed and Lena was helping Daniel clean up the dinner debris, he said quietly, "For what it's worth, I think Evan's right. It was dumb." "He was my husband," Lena said. "I thought I was supporting him." "Did he support you?" The question hung in the air between them. "I used to think so," Lena said finally. "Now I'm not sure he ever did." Daniel was quiet for a moment, loading plates into the dishwasher with methodical precision. "Can I ask what happened? You don't have to tell me. But if you want to talk about it." Lena surprised herself by wanting to. Maybe it was the domestic comfort of the kitchen, or the fact that Daniel had shared his own grief so openly, or simply that she was tired of carrying it alone. So she told him about the diagnosis, the treatments, Marcus's growing distance and frustration, the affair, the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, being thrown out with nowhere to go. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry he made you believe your worth was tied to something you couldn't control, and I'm really sorry he was too much of a coward to stand by you when things got hard." Lena blinked back tears. "He said I was worthless." "Then he's an idiot." Daniel's voice was firm. "You've been here less than a week, and you've already made this house run smoother than it has in 2 years. You've helped my kids with homework I don't understand. You've cooked meals that didn't come from a box. You've folded more laundry than I knew existed. You're not worthless, Lena. You're anything but. That's just domestic stuff. Anyone could do that. But you're doing it, and you're doing it well, and my kids—" He paused, shook his head. "My kids light up when you're around. Mia asks for you every morning. Noah actually did his reading homework without complaint because you made it into a game. Evan tied his own shoes yesterday because he wanted to show you he could." "That's not—" "It is," Daniel said gently. "It absolutely is. Whatever that man told you about your value, he was wrong. You're proving it every single day just by being here." Lena didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to accept it, but maybe she didn't have to accept it all at once. Maybe she could just let it sit there, like a seed that might grow into something true. A week became 2. Lena still told herself it was temporary, still looked at apartment listings online and tried to figure out how she could afford first and last month's rent with no job and no savings. Still reminded herself every morning that this wasn't her family, wasn't her home, wasn't her life. But it was getting harder to remember. Harder when Mia crawled into her lap during movie night and fell asleep there, warm and trusting. Harder when Noah asked her to come to his science fair and beamed when she showed up. Harder when Evan started calling her Miss Lena who lives with us, instead of just Miss Lena. Harder when Daniel started looking at her with something that wasn't just kindness. She told herself she was imagining it, that the long looks across the dinner table and the way his hand would brush hers when they did dishes together were accidents, that the conversations that stretched late into the night after the kids were asleep were just friendship. But then one night, 2.5 weeks after she'd arrived, everything shifted. It was past midnight. The kids were long asleep. Lena had been in bed but couldn't sleep, her mind churning with logistics and fears and the growing awareness that she was getting too comfortable here. She'd come downstairs for water and found Daniel in the living room, sitting in the dark, a glass of something amber in his hand. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked quietly. He startled slightly, then shook his head. "Anniversary. Of Sarah's death. 2 years today." He took a sip of his drink. Whiskey, probably. "The kids don't remember the date. I never remind them. But I always remember." Lena sat down on the other end of the couch, leaving space between them. "Do you want to talk about her?" "I don't know." He was quiet for a moment. "Most people don't ask. They get uncomfortable." "I'm not most people." A small smile ghosted across his face. "No, you're not." He talked then. About Sarah, how they'd met in college, married young, built a life together. How she'd been funny and fierce and completely devoted to their kids. How the last thing she'd said to him that morning was, "Don't forget to pick up milk." "Such an ordinary thing," Daniel said, his voice rough. "And I didn't get the milk. I was at work, caught up in some crisis that probably wasn't actually a crisis, and I forgot. And then she was gone, and I never got to tell her I was sorry about the milk." "She knew you loved her," Lena said gently. "The milk didn't matter." "I know, rationally I know, but grief isn't rational." "No," Lena agreed, "it's not." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Daniel said, "Can I ask you something?" "Okay." "Why did you marry him?" "Marcus? What did you see in him?" Lena considered the question. "I thought he was solid, reliable, the kind of person who'd stay. I'd had enough chaos in my life. My dad left when I was 12, my mom struggled with depression, everything always felt unstable. Marcus seemed like the opposite of that, like safety. But he wasn't. No, he was just conditional. He loved me as long as I was what he needed me to be. When I couldn't be that anymore, the love disappeared." She paused. "Or maybe it was never really there at all." "His loss," Daniel said quietly. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "I know you well enough." He turned to look at her, and even in the darkness she could see the intensity in his eyes. "I know you're kind. I know you're resilient. I know you make my kids laugh and my house feel like a home again. I know you fold fitted sheets properly, which is basically magic. I know you're stronger than you think you are." "Daniel, I know this is complicated," he continued. "I know you're rebuilding your life, and I'm still figuring out how to live without Sarah, and this whole situation is messy and strange. But I need you to know you're not a burden here. You're not temporary, or you don't have to be." Lena's heart was hammering. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying stay. Really stay. Not as a guest. Not as someone earning their keep. Just stay. Be part of this." He gestured vaguely around the room. "Be part of us. I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." He set down his glass and shifted closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "These past 2 weeks, watching you with my kids, talking to you every night, having you here, it's the first time since Sarah died that I felt like I might actually be okay, like we might all be okay." "That's not because of me," Lena whispered. "It is, though." His hand found hers, tentative, giving her room to pull away. She didn't. "You brought light back into this house. You brought hope. And I know it's too soon, and I know you probably think I'm crazy, but I can't. I don't want to pretend I'm not falling for you." Lena's breath caught. "Daniel, if you don't feel the same way, tell me. I'll back off. We'll go back to however you want this to be, but if there's even a chance—" She kissed him. She didn't plan it, didn't think it through, just leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, cutting off his words with the answer she couldn't quite speak. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Daniel's hand came up to cup her face, gentle and sure, and he kissed her back like she was something precious, something worth holding on to. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her forehead against his. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Me too. I don't know how to do this, how to trust again, how to believe I'm enough." "We'll figure it out," Daniel said. "Together, if you want to." "I want to," Lena heard herself say. "I really, really want to." He smiled, and it was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the dark, two broken people finding wholeness in the spaces between their cracks. And for the first time since that night at the bus terminal, Lena let herself believe in the possibility of tomorrow. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. Lena woke in her own bed, alone, but the memory of Daniel's kiss still burned on her lips like a brand. She touched her mouth with trembling fingers, half convinced she'd dreamed the entire thing. But no, it had been real. The conversation, the confession, the way he'd looked at her like she was something worth wanting. She should have been terrified, should have been running for the door, protecting what was left of her broken heart. Instead, she felt alive. The house was already stirring when she came downstairs. Saturday morning, which meant pancakes and chaos and the luxury of no school rush. Lena paused in the kitchen doorway, suddenly uncertain. Would things be different now? Awkward? Would Daniel regret what he'd said in the darkness? But when he looked up from the stove and smiled, that soft, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, all her fears quieted. "Morning," he said, and there was something in his voice, something warm and intimate that made her blush. "Morning." "Miss Lena," Mia appeared from under the table, where she'd apparently been organizing her collection of toy horses. "You're awake. Dad's making chocolate chip pancakes because it's a special day." "Is it?" Lena asked, accepting the cup of coffee Daniel pressed into her hands, his fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "Every day you're here is special," Daniel said quietly, and the look he gave her made her heart stutter. Evan came thundering down the stairs, Noah close behind, and the moment shifted back into the comfortable chaos of breakfast. But throughout the meal, Lena caught Daniel watching her, and each time their eyes met, something electric passed between them. The children noticed nothing, or if they did, they said nothing, too absorbed in their pancakes and their plans for the day. Noah wanted to work on his science project. Mia needed help building a fairy house in the backyard. Evan was determined to finally master tying his shoes without help. It was beautifully, perfectly normal, and it terrified Lena how much she wanted to keep it. After breakfast, while the kids scattered to their various pursuits, Daniel caught her hand in the hallway. "We should talk," he said. "Really talk. About what happens next." "Okay." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. They ended up in his home office, a cluttered space dominated by 2 large monitors and stacks of paperwork that suggested organized chaos. Daniel closed the door, not all the way. She noticed that, the way he left it cracked so they could hear the kids, and gestured for her to sit. "I meant what I said last night," he began, leaning against his desk, arms crossed. "All of it. But I also realize I dropped a lot on you at once, and you're still figuring out your own life, and the last thing I want is to add pressure." "You're not," Lena said quickly. Then, more honestly, "Or maybe you are, but not in a bad way. It's just, this is all happening so fast. A month ago, I was married to someone else. 3 weeks ago, I was freezing to death in a bus terminal. And now I'm—" She gestured helplessly. "I don't even know what I am." "You're someone who's allowed to take her time," Daniel said gently. "Someone who doesn't have to have all the answers right now. But you need answers about whether I'm staying, what this is, where it's going. I need you to be honest with me, that's all." He moved to sit in the chair next to hers, close enough that their knees almost touched. "Tell me what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're afraid of." Lena took a breath, searching for the right words. "I'm afraid of being broken, of not being enough. I know what you said about my worth and what I contribute here, but Daniel, I can't have children. And you already have 3, so maybe that doesn't matter to you. But it matters to me because it's this thing I can't escape, this permanent failure stamped on my body. Lena, let me finish." She needed to get this out, needed him to understand. "I'm afraid that one day you'll look at me and see what Marcus saw. Something incomplete, something not quite right. And I don't think I could survive that again. Being wanted and then unwanted. Being loved and then discarded." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'm not Marcus. I know, I do know that. But knowing it and believing it are different things." He was quiet for a moment, and she could see him choosing his words carefully. "When Sarah died, everyone told me I'd find love again, that I was young, that I had my whole life ahead of me, that time heals all wounds, and I hated them for it because they didn't understand. I didn't want to heal. I wanted Sarah back." Lena listened, seeing the old pain flicker across his features. "But then you showed up," he continued, "and for the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than grief. And it scared the hell out of me because I thought wanting someone new meant forgetting Sarah, replacing her, betraying what we had." "And now?" Lena asked softly. "Now I understand that love isn't finite, that having room in my heart for you doesn't diminish what I had with Sarah. She was my past. She's part of who I am, but you—" He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You could be my future, if you want that." "What about the kids? What about them? They love their mother. I can't replace her." "No one's asking you to." Daniel's voice was firm. "Sarah will always be their mother, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for you. They already love you, Lena, not as a replacement, as yourself." "How can you be sure?" "Because I watch them with you. I see the way Mia saves her best artwork to show you, how Noah asks for your help even when I'm available, how Evan tells you things he doesn't tell me. They've let you in, not because they're forgetting Sarah, but because you're you." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it." He took her hand, laced their fingers together. "Stay. Really stay. Not as a guest, not temporarily. Move your things out of the guest room. Be part of this family. Be with me." "I don't have any things," Lena said with a watery laugh. "I have a suitcase of clothes and divorce papers and nothing else." "Then we'll get you things. We'll build from here." He squeezed her hand. "Unless you don't want to. If this is too much, too fast, if you need space or time or—" She kissed him again, cutting off his rambling with the same certainty she'd felt last night. When they broke apart, she said, "I want to stay. I'm terrified and I probably need therapy and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I want to stay." The smile that broke across Daniel's face was incandescent. Yeah? Yeah. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself sink into the embrace, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to have this. They stayed like that until Evan's voice called up the stairs. Dad! Mia's trying to take all my horses for her fairy house, and she says you said she could, but you didn't, right? Daniel groaned, and reality intrudes. Welcome to parenthood, Lena said, surprising herself with the joke. He looked at her, something soft and wondering in his expression. Welcome to it indeed. The days that followed felt different. Not dramatically. The routine stayed mostly the same. The chaos of family life continued unabated. But there was a new dimension to everything, a sense of intentionality. Lena moved her few belongings out of the guest room and into Daniel's room, and if the children noticed, they said nothing. Or rather, Mia said, "Does this mean Miss Lena is staying forever?" And when Daniel answered, if she wants to, had responded with good and gone back to her coloring. Lena started looking for jobs, updating the resume she hadn't touched in years. Teaching positions mostly, though the school year was already well underway and openings were scarce. You don't have to rush, Daniel said one evening, watching her scroll through listings with increasing frustration. We're doing fine financially. Take your time finding something you actually want. I need to contribute, Lena insisted. I can't just live here and do nothing. You're doing plenty. You're raising 3 children who aren't even yours. They're not mine, though. That's the point. Daniel set down his laptop and gave her his full attention. Do you want them to be? The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying. I don't know if I'm allowed to want that, Lena admitted. They have a mother. You're the woman who makes them breakfast and helps with homework and kisses scraped knees and reads bedtime stories. You're the woman they ask for when they're scared or sad or excited. What would you call that if not mothering? Babysitting? Lena tried to joke, but her voice cracked. Lena. Daniel moved to sit beside her, taking her hands. You're allowed to be important to them. You're allowed to love them and let them love you. That doesn't diminish Sarah. It just means they're lucky enough to have 2 women in their lives who care about them. One of whom is gone. Yes, but one of whom is here. He squeezed her hands. Be here. Fully. Stop waiting for permission to be part of this family. Before Lena could respond, Noah appeared in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Can I ask you something? He said, addressing Lena. Of course. He came further into the room, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. There's a thing at school, a science fair presentation thing, and we're supposed to invite our parents. He paused, took a breath. Would you come? Both of you. Lena's throat tightened. Noah, I know you're not my mom, Noah said quickly. I know that, but you're important, and I want you there, if you want to come. She looked at this 9-year-old boy who was trying so hard to be brave, to articulate something complicated and real, and felt her heart crack open. I would love to come, she said softly. Relief flooded Noah's face. Really? Really. He smiled, rare and genuine, and then, in a move that surprised all 3 of them, crossed the room and hugged her, quick and fierce, and over almost before it started. Thanks, Lena, he said, and disappeared back upstairs before she could respond. Lena sat frozen, the feeling of his small arms around her ribs still imprinted on her body. That's the first time he's hugged anyone who isn't family since Sarah died, Daniel said quietly. Just so you know. Daniel, you're family, he said simply, whether you believe it yet or not. The science fair was on a Thursday evening, and Lena spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear. Too formal would be weird. Too casual would seem like she didn't care. She finally settled on slacks and a sweater, something teacher-appropriate, and tried not to think too hard about what that choice meant. The school gymnasium was packed with students and parents and elaborate poster boards detailing everything from volcano simulations to plant growth experiments. Noah's project was on renewable energy, specifically whether homemade solar panels could power small devices. He worked really hard on it, Daniel murmured as they approached Noah's station. Sarah was big on environmental stuff, and I think this is his way of connecting to that. Lena's chest ached at the thought. It's beautiful. Noah saw them coming and his face lit up, not just at Daniel, but at both of them equally. You came. Of course we did, Lena said. We wouldn't miss it. She listened as Noah explained his methodology, his results, his conclusions. He was articulate and passionate and so clearly proud of what he'd accomplished. And when the judges came by to evaluate, Lena found herself holding her breath alongside Daniel, invested in this child's success as if it were her own. Noah won second place in his category, and the grin on his face was worth everything. We should celebrate, Daniel announced. Ice cream? Yes! Noah pumped his fist. As they were leaving, one of the other mothers approached, smiling at Lena. You must be so proud. He's a bright kid. Thank you, Lena said automatically. How old were you when you had him? You look so young to have a 9-year-old. Lena froze, the assumption hitting her like a slap. Before she could correct the woman, Daniel's hand found the small of her back, steady and sure. We're proud of all our kids, he said smoothly, neither confirming nor denying the implication. The woman smiled and moved on, none the wiser. But Lena stood rooted to the spot, her mind reeling. The woman had assumed she was Noah's mother, had looked at the three of them together and seen a family. Hey, Daniel's voice was soft in her ear. You okay? She thought, I know. And you didn't correct her. No. He turned her gently to face him. Because in every way that matters, she wasn't wrong. You're here. You showed up. You care about him. That's what mothering is, Lena. Not biology. Presence. Noah had gone ahead to find his siblings, leaving Daniel and Lena in a moment of relative privacy in the crowded gymnasium. I can't give you more children, Lena said, the fear finally surfacing. I can't give you a baby of your own, a biological child to carry on your name or whatever it is people want. Enough, Daniel said firmly. You're enough. I have 3 children. I don't need more. What I need is someone who loves them and loves me and wants to build a life together. That's you. That's all I want. What if you change your mind? I won't. But what if... He kissed her, there in the middle of the school gymnasium, in front of parents and teachers and curious students. Kissed her like she was precious, like she was chosen, like she was exactly what he wanted. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. I'm not Marcus. I won't leave because you can't give me something I don't need. I'm here because of who you are, not what your body can do. Lena wanted to believe him, wanted it with a desperation that scared her. Okay, she whispered. Okay? I'll try. To believe you. To believe I'm enough. He smiled and pressed his forehead to hers. That's all I ask. They collected the children and went for ice cream, and Lena watched Noah's joy and Mia's chocolate-smeared face and Evan's enthusiastic recounting of his own day. She watched Daniel navigate the chaos with practiced ease and infinite patience, and she let herself think, just for a moment, that maybe this could be her life. The call came 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning while Lena was folding laundry and Daniel was in a video conference. Miss Moore? The voice was professional, female. This is Patricia Grant. We spoke several weeks ago regarding your divorce proceedings. Lena's blood went cold. Marcus's lawyer. Yes? I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Moore is contesting the settlement. He's requesting that you return several items he believes were removed from the marital home without his permission. I didn't take anything, Lena said, confused. I left with 1 suitcase of clothes. He's claiming otherwise. There's also the matter of the joint bank account. Mr. Moore is alleging that you accessed funds that were... I haven't touched that account since the night he threw me out, Lena interrupted, her voice shaking. I don't even have the card anymore. I left it on the kitchen counter. Nevertheless, there have been withdrawals, and Mr. Moore is suggesting that perhaps you should... This is harassment, Lena said flatly. There's nothing to contest. I signed his papers. I took nothing. I want nothing from him. Be that as it may, he's within his rights to... Lena hung up, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Daniel appeared in the doorway moments later, his conference clearly abandoned. What's wrong? I heard you on the phone. Marcus. The name tasted like poison. His lawyer called. He's contesting the settlement, claiming I took things from the house, that I accessed bank accounts. None of it's true, but he's... Her voice broke. He won't just let me go. Daniel's expression went thunderous. Can he do this? Legally, I don't know. Probably. He has money and lawyers, and I have nothing. The old fear was rising, the sense of worthlessness, of being ground under someone's heel. Maybe I should just go back, talk to him, figure out what he wants. Absolutely not. Daniel crossed the room and took her shoulders gently but firmly. You're not going back to him. You're not talking to him. And you're definitely not alone in this. Daniel, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you. We're getting you a lawyer, a good one. And we're dealing with this properly through legal channels so that man can never touch you again. I don't have money for a lawyer. I do. When she started to protest, he said, This isn't charity, Lena. This is me protecting someone I love from a man who's trying to hurt her. Let me do this. Someone he loved. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and undeniable. You love me? Lena whispered. Daniel's expression softened. Yeah, I do. I probably have for a while now, but I was trying not to rush you, but yes, I love you, and I'm not going to let Marcus or anyone else make you feel small ever again. Lena's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I think I have since you gave me your jacket at the bus terminal. I just didn't think I was allowed to feel it. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself break a little, let the fear and frustration pour out against his chest while he held her steady. We'll handle this, he murmured into her hair. Together. Together, she echoed, and tried to believe it. The lawyer Daniel hired was a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen, who listened to Lena's story with the focused intensity of a predator sizing up prey. He's bluffing, she said when Lena finished. Or he's trying to intimidate you into giving him something he thinks he's entitled to. Either way, we shut it down fast and hard. How? Lena asked. We document everything. We get statements from the taxi driver who took you to the bus terminal that night. We pull bank records showing you haven't touched that account. We get affidavits from anyone who can verify you left with one suitcase and nothing else. Rebecca's smile was sharp. And then we send his lawyer a very polite letter explaining that if Mr. Moore continues this harassment, we'll file a countersuit for emotional distress. Will that work? 90% of the time, yes. Men like your ex-husband are bullies. They're used to people backing down. When someone stands up to them, they fold. She paused. There's always the 10% chance he's actually unhinged and will push forward. But if that happens, we bury him in paperwork until he gives up. Daniel, who'd been sitting quietly beside Lena throughout the consultation, said, Do it, whatever it takes. Rebecca nodded. I'll have the initial response drafted by end of day. In the meantime, Lena, do not answer any calls from Marcus or his lawyer. All communication goes through me now. Leaving the lawyer's office, Lena felt simultaneously lighter and more anxious. What if this backfires? What if he escalates? Then we escalate right back, Daniel said firmly. You're not alone in this anymore. He can't hurt you. That night, after the children were asleep, Lena and Daniel sat in the backyard despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching their breath fog in the air. I never asked, Lena said quietly. What you're building at work? Your company. You said there was a big contract. Daniel was silent for a moment. Yeah, there is. Tell me about it. He sighed, a sound heavy with something Lena couldn't quite identify. It's a government contract. Healthcare systems for VA hospitals across 3 states. It's huge, potentially 5 years of work, enough to triple the size of my company. That's incredible, Lena said. Daniel, it requires relocation, he said quietly. Not permanent, but I'd need to be in DC for at least 4 months, maybe 6. Overseeing implementation, training their teams, working on site. Lena's stomach dropped. When? They want me to start in February, 6 weeks from now. 6 weeks. Barely any time at all. Can you do it remotely? Lena asked, already knowing the answer. Not this part. Later phases maybe, but the initial setup requires physical presence. He turned to look at her. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, trying to decide if I should take it at all. Of course you should take it. This is your career, your company. It's 4 to 6 months away from my kids, Daniel said. Away from you, right when we're just figuring this out. We'll manage. Will we? His voice was raw. Because I've already lost one person I loved. I'm not eager to lose another. You won't lose me, Lena said. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Long distance, 4 to 6 months, 3 children who needed stability. How could that possibly work? Come with me, Daniel said suddenly. Lena stared at him. What? Come with me. All of us. The kids can transfer schools for a semester, and you could look for teaching jobs in D.C., or take the time to figure out what you want to do. We could rent a place, make it an adventure. Daniel, that's insane. You can't uproot your children's entire lives for a contract. People do it all the time. Not like this. Not so quickly. He was quiet, and Lena could see him struggling with something. What if I don't go? He said finally. What if I turn it down? Then you resent me for holding you back, and we fall apart anyway. Lena shook her head. You have to take this opportunity, Daniel. It's too big not to. But we'll figure it out, she said, with more confidence than she felt. You go. I'll stay here with the kids. We'll video call every day. It's 4 months, maybe 6. We can do that. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes. Ambition versus family, career versus love. I don't want to choose, he said quietly. You're not choosing. You're building a future for all of us. That's different. He pulled her close, and they sat there in the cold, holding each other against the uncertainty of what came next. I love you, he said into her hair. I love you too. And Lena meant it. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was about to shift, and she had no idea if they'd survive it. The conversation with the children happened on a Sunday afternoon, with all 5 of them gathered in the living room, and a palpable tension in the air that even Evan could sense. Are we in trouble? He asked immediately, his eyes wide. Nobody, Daniel assured him. Nobody's in trouble. We just need to talk about something important. Mia climbed onto the couch next to Lena, pressing against her side with the unconscious trust of a child who'd claimed her person. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, his expression already guarded in that way he had when he sensed bad news coming. Daniel took a breath. You know how Daddy's company has been working on that big project, the one for the hospitals? The VA thing, Noah said. You've been talking about it for months. Right. Well, they want me to go to Washington, D.C. to help set everything up. It would mean being away for a few months. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Mia said in a small voice, How many months? 4, maybe 6. I'd come home for visits when I could, and we'd video call every single day, but I wouldn't be here for dinner or bedtime or… No. Noah's voice was flat, final. You can't go. Noah, you can't leave us. The 9-year-old's face had gone pale. Mom left and she didn't come back. You can't leave too. The words hit like a physical blow. Daniel moved to kneel in front of his son, but Noah jerked away. She didn't choose to leave, Daniel said gently. What happened to Mom was an accident. This is different. This is work, and I'd be coming back, I promise. That's what you said when she went to the store that day, Noah said, and there were tears streaming down his face now. You said she'd be right back, but she wasn't. And if you go, you might not come back either. Lena's heart shattered. She'd known the children had lost their mother, but seeing the depth of that trauma, the way it had embedded itself in Noah's bones, was something else entirely. Mia had started crying too, silently, her small body shaking against Lena's side. Evan looked between his siblings and his father, his bottom lip trembling. What if we all went? Lena heard herself say. Together, as a family. Everyone turned to look at her. We talked about this, Daniel said carefully. You said uprooting the kids wasn't fair. I know what I said, but looking at them now… She glanced at Noah's devastated face, Mia's tears, Evan's confusion. Maybe staying together is more important than staying put. You'd do that? Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. You'd come with us? If it meant keeping this family together? Yes. Lena looked at each of the children in turn. But only if that's what everyone wants. This affects all of us. I want to stay together, Mia said immediately, wiping her eyes. I don't want Daddy to go without us. Me neither, Evan chimed in. All eyes turned to Noah, who was still radiating anger and fear in equal measure. It doesn't matter what I want, he said bitterly. Adults always do what they want anyway. That's not true, Daniel said firmly. What you want matters. What all of you want matters. That's why we're having this conversation. Then I want you to stay, Noah shot back. I want everything to stay the same. I want Mom to not be dead, and for us to be a normal family again. The raw honesty of it left everyone speechless. Lena found her voice first. You're right, she said quietly. That's what you deserve. That's what should have happened. And I'm so sorry it didn't. Noah looked at her, surprise flickering through the anger. But we can't change what happened, Lena continued. We can only decide what happens next. And right now, your dad has an opportunity that could help a lot of people and make sure you guys have everything you need. But he won't take it if it means hurting you. None of us will. So what do we do? Noah asked, and he sounded so young, so lost. We decide together, Daniel said. Real family meeting. Everyone gets a vote, everyone's voice counts. And whatever we choose as a team. They talked for over an hour about what moving would mean, new schools, new friends, new routines, about what staying would mean. Daniel gone for months, the family fractured by distance, about fears and hopes and what-ifs. Slowly, Noah's walls began to crack. If we went, he said cautiously, would Lena come too? If you wanted me to, Lena said, if you think that would help, would you be in charge while Dad's working? Lena glanced at Daniel, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I would take care of you, she said carefully. Make sure you got to school, help with homework, make dinner, all of that. But I'm not trying to replace your mom, Noah. I could never do that. I know, Noah said, and his voice was small. But Mom's not here, and you are. The simple statement held so much weight, so much acceptance, that Lena felt tears prick her eyes. So, we're voting? Mia asked, ever practical, on whether we go to Washington? We're voting, Daniel confirmed. One by one, they raised their hands, Mia and Evan with enthusiasm, Noah with reluctant acceptance, Daniel and Lena with the understanding that they were committing to something enormous and terrifying and necessary. It was unanimous. They were going to Washington, D.C. The next 6 weeks were a blur of logistics and change. Daniel accepted the contract and immediately dove into pre-departure planning. Lena enrolled the children in schools near where they'd be living, a temporary rental in Arlington that Daniel's company was helping to arrange. She requested transcripts, medical records, everything 3 children needed to transfer their lives across the country. She also finally told her sister what had happened. The phone call with Amy was long overdue and went about as well as expected. Let me get this straight, Amy said, her voice crackling over the line from Seattle. You got divorced, moved in with a stranger and his 3 kids, and now you're moving to D.C. with them? Lena, what the hell? It's not as crazy as it sounds, Lena said, though even to her own ears, it absolutely was. It sounds insane. You can't just replace your entire life in 6 weeks. I'm not replacing it. I'm building a new one. With a man you barely know. I know him, Lena said quietly. I know he's kind and patient, and he loves his kids more than anything. I know he sees me as more than just a functioning uterus. I know he makes me feel like maybe I'm not broken after all. Amy was silent for a long moment. Marcus really did a number on you, didn't he? Yeah, he did. And this Daniel guy, he's different? Completely. Another pause, then softer. Are you happy? Lena considered the question. Was she happy? She was terrified and overwhelmed and still dealing with the legal aftermath of her divorce. But when she thought about Daniel's smile, about Mia's laughter, about Noah slowly learning to trust her, about Evan's sticky hugs, yeah, she said, I think I am. Then I'm happy for you, Amy said, terrified but happy. Just promise me you'll be careful, and if anything feels wrong, if he turns out to be another Marcus, he won't. But if he does, you call me, immediately. I will fly out and drag you back myself if I have to. Despite everything, Lena smiled. Deal. Marcus's harassment continued sporadically. His lawyer would call Rebecca Chen with new allegations that Lena had kept jewelry, that she'd damaged property, that she'd violated some clause of the settlement. Each time, Rebecca would calmly dismantle the claims with documentation and facts. And each time, Marcus would back down. He's trying to maintain control, Rebecca explained during one of their check-ins. He can't accept that you've moved on, so he keeps pulling you back into his orbit through legal channels. How do we make him stop? Lena asked. We're filing for a restraining order. Not a physical one, since he hasn't made threats, but a legal one preventing further harassment through his attorney. If he violates it, there are consequences. Will it work? Eventually. Men like him need to feel like they've won something. Once he realizes he's not getting anything from you, not fear, not compliance, not even attention, he'll move on. Lena wanted to believe that, but part of her would always be waiting for Marcus's next move, the next way he'd try to prove she was worthless. 2 weeks before the move to D.C., Lena was helping Mia pack her room when the little girl asked, "Are you going to marry my daddy?" Lena's hand stilled on the box of stuffed animals she'd been filling. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you love him, and he loves you, and that's what people do when they love each other. They get married." "Sometimes," Lena said carefully, "but not always right away. Sometimes people need time to be sure." "Are you sure?" Such a simple question from a 6-year-old. Such an impossible answer. "I'm sure I love him," Lena said, "and I'm sure I love you and your brothers. But marriage is a big step, and I've already made that mistake once. I want to be really, really careful before I do it again." Mia considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "Because your first husband was mean to you." It wasn't a question, but Lena answered anyway. "Yes, he was. Daddy would never be mean to you. He's not mean to anybody. Even when Noah breaks stuff or Evan makes messes, Daddy just takes deep breaths and uses his calm voice." Despite the heavy subject matter, Lena smiled. "You're right. Your dad is very patient. So you should marry him," Mia concluded with 6-year-old logic. "Because then you'd be my mom for real." Lena's breath caught. "Mia, I know you're not my real mom," Mia said quickly. "I know my real mom died and she's not coming back. But you're here, and you braid my hair and help me with reading, and you always remember that I don't like tomatoes. That's mom stuff." "It is," Lena agreed, her voice thick. "So even if you don't marry Daddy, could you still be my mom anyway? Just the regular kind, not the married kind?" Lena pulled Mia into her lap, this sweet, brave little girl who'd lost so much and was still willing to open her heart. "I would be honored," she whispered, "to be any kind of mom you want me to be." Mia hugged her tight, and Lena closed her eyes against the tears, overwhelmed by the trust being placed in her hands. That night, she told Daniel about the conversation. They were in bed, the house finally quiet after hours of packing chaos, and Lena had been turning the moment over and over in her mind. "Mia asked if I was going to marry you," she said into the darkness. Daniel went very still beside her. "What did you tell her?" "That I needed to be sure, that I'd made mistakes before and wanted to be careful." "And are you?" "Sure." Lena rolled to face him, trying to read his expression in the dim light from the hallway. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Not yet," Daniel said carefully. "But eventually, yes, when the time is right, when you're ready, when you believe that what we have is real and lasting and not going to disappear the moment things get hard. I want to believe that. But you don't. Not completely." She couldn't lie to him. "There's still a part of me waiting for you to realize I'm not enough, that I'm broken in ways that matter." Daniel sat up and turned on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with soft light. "Look at me," he said gently. Lena sat up too, pulling the blanket around herself. "You are not broken," Daniel said, each word deliberate. "You have a medical condition that affects your fertility. That's it. That's all it is. It doesn't make you less of a woman, less of a partner, less of a mother to my children. It's just a thing your body can't do, like how I can't carry a tune or how Noah can't eat shellfish. It's a fact, not a failure." Marcus made it feel like a failure. Marcus was wrong and cruel and so wrapped up in his own ego that he couldn't see what he had. Daniel took her hands. I see you, Lena. Not your diagnosis, not your fertility. You. The woman who makes terrible coffee and folds fitted sheets like a magician. The woman who stayed up all night helping Noah with his science project and who learned to braid hair from YouTube videos because Mia asked. The woman who's braver than she thinks she is. I'm not brave, Lena whispered. I'm terrified all the time. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. He cupped her face gently. You left an abusive situation. You accepted help from strangers. You let yourself care about 3 traumatized kids and their mess of a father. You're packing up your entire life to move across the country for a family that isn't even legally yours. That's brave, Lena. That's so damn brave. She wanted to believe him, wanted to internalize these words and let them replace Marcus's poison. What if I can't be what they need? She asked. What if I'm not mother enough for them? You already are, Daniel said simply. They chose you. Noah chose you when he asked you to his science fair. Mia chose you when she asked if you'd be her mom. Evan chooses you every time he runs to you with a scraped knee or a bad dream. You don't need to be Sarah. You just need to be you. And that's enough? More than enough. He pressed his forehead to hers. I love you. Not in spite of your infertility, not with reservations or conditions. I love you because you're you, because you make my life better, because my kids are happier with you in their world, because I wake up every morning grateful that you're here. Lena's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, so much it scares me. Good scared or bad scared? I don't know yet. He smiled softly. That's honest. I'll take it. They held each other in the lamplight, 2 broken people who'd somehow found wholeness in each other's cracks. The week before they left, Marcus made one final play. He showed up at the house. Lena was alone. Daniel had taken the kids to their grandmother's for a goodbye visit, and Lena had stayed behind to supervise the movers. She was directing them on which boxes went into storage and which went to DC when a familiar Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Her blood turned to ice. Marcus got out of the car, looking exactly as he had the last time she'd seen him. Tailored suit, expensive watch, that expression of vague condescension that had once made her feel small. Now it just made her angry. Lena, he said, approaching with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. We need to talk. No, we don't. She turned back to the movers. That box goes to storage. The one marked kitchen goes to DC. Lena, please, just 5 minutes. I have nothing to say to you, and you're violating the harassment order by being here. He had the audacity to look wounded. Harassment order? Lena, I'm your husband. Ex-husband, she corrected coldly. As of 6 weeks ago. You made that very clear. I made a mistake, Marcus said, and there was something in his voice, desperation maybe, or the realization that his actions had consequences. Jenna and I, it's not working out. The baby's been complicated. She's not who I thought she was, and I've been thinking about us. There is no us, Lena said, turning to face him fully. There hasn't been an us for a long time. Maybe there never was. Don't say that. We had 6 good years. We had 6 years where I tried to be what you wanted, and you tolerated me until I couldn't give you the one thing you decided mattered most. Her voice was steady, factual. You threw me out, Marcus. In the middle of the night, in winter, with nowhere to go, you called me worthless. I was angry. I didn't mean... You meant every word. Lena crossed her arms. And you know what? You were right about one thing. I was worthless. To you. Because you measured my value by my uterus. But I'm worth everything to people who actually loved me. Marcus's expression hardened. This is about him, isn't it? The man you've been living with. You've known him, what, 2 months? And you're already playing house with his kids? I'm not playing anything. I'm building a life with people who want me in it. You think he's going to stay when you can't give him more children? When the novelty wears off and he realizes what you are? The old fear tried to rise up, tried to take hold. But Lena had spent 6 weeks learning a different truth, and she wouldn't let Marcus poison it. He already knows what I am, she said quietly. He knows I'm infertile. He knows I can't have biological children, and he chose me anyway. Because unlike you, he understands that my worth isn't determined by my reproductive system. Lena, You need to leave, she said firmly. Right now, before I call the police and have you removed for violating a legal order. You're making a mistake, Marcus said, but he was backing toward his car now. This rebound thing with him won't last. And when it falls apart, don't come crying to me. I won't, Lena said, because even if it did fall apart, which it won't, I would still rather be alone than ever be with you again. She watched him drive away, waited until his Mercedes disappeared around the corner, and then her legs gave out. She sat down hard on the front steps, shaking, adrenaline flooding her system. She'd done it. She'd faced him. She'd stood her ground. And she'd meant every word. When Daniel came home an hour later, kids in tow and carrying takeout for dinner, he found Lena exactly where she'd been, sitting on the steps, staring at nothing. What happened? He asked immediately, his voice sharp with concern. The kids tumbled past her into the house, oblivious, but Daniel crouched in front of her, searching her face. Marcus came, Lena said. He wanted to talk, to tell me he'd made a mistake, that things with Jenna weren't working out. Daniel's expression went thunderous. He what? I told him to leave. I told him I'd rather be alone than ever be with him again. She looked up at Daniel. And I meant it. Some of the fury drained from his face, replaced by pride. You did? I did. Lena took a shaky breath. He tried to make me doubt this. Doubt us. Said you'd leave when you realized what I am. And for a second the old fear came back. But then I remembered what you said about my worth not being tied to my body, and I believed it more than I believed him. Daniel pulled her up and into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm so proud of you, he murmured into her hair. So damn proud. I'm proud of me too, Lena said, and realized with some surprise that it was true. She'd stood up to the man who'd broken her. She'd chosen herself, chosen this family, chosen to believe in her own worth. It felt like victory. That night, after dinner and baths and bedtime stories, after the house had finally settled into sleep, Daniel found Lena in what would soon be their old bedroom, looking at the bare walls where pictures used to hang. Penny for your thoughts? He asked. Just thinking about endings and beginnings, Lena said. How this house was supposed to be temporary and now we're leaving it. How everything's changing so fast. Having second thoughts? No. She turned to face him. Actually, I'm having first thoughts, real thoughts, about what I want and who I want to be. And who's that? Someone who stops waiting for permission to be happy. She crossed to him, took his hands. Someone who chooses love even when it's scary. Someone who's a mother to 3 amazing kids and a partner to an incredible man. Someone who believes she's enough. You are, Daniel said. You always have been. I'm starting to believe that. Lena smiled, and it felt real, felt true. Ask me again? Ask you what? What Mia asked. If I'm going to marry you. Daniel's eyes widened. Lena, I'm not saying yes, not yet, but I'm saying I want to, someday. When we get to DC, when we've proven to ourselves that this works even when it's hard, when I can look at a future with you and not feel terrified, I'm saying I want that. I want forever with you. The smile that broke across Daniel's face was incandescent. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and Lena let herself fall into it, into him, into the promise of everything they were building together. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Daniel said, for the record, I'm going to hold you to that. The someday yes. I'm counting on it, Lena said. And for the first time since Marcus had handed her those divorce papers, she looked at her future and saw not emptiness, but possibility. Not endings, but beginnings. Not worthlessness, but worth. The flight to DC was chaos incarnate. Evan had never been on a plane before and spent the entire boarding process asking increasingly elaborate questions about how wings worked and what happened if they fell off. Mia insisted on bringing her entire collection of toy horses despite the weight limit, and only agreed to leave half behind after Lena promised they'd be waiting when they got back. Noah sat with his headphones on, withdrawn and anxious, though he'd reached for Lena's hand during takeoff and hadn't quite let go. Daniel was buried in work emails, already mentally in contract mode, and Lena found herself managing the chaos alone for the first time. Not helping Daniel manage it, not assisting, just doing it. Being the person these three children looked to when they needed something. Being their mother. The words still felt too big in her mouth, too presumptuous. But when Evan threw up 30 minutes into the flight and immediately started crying for her, not Daniel, not a flight attendant, but her, Lena stopped questioning it and just acted. She cleaned him up, got him settled with ginger ale and crackers, and sat with him until he fell asleep against her shoulder. Across the aisle, Daniel caught her eye and mouthed, "Thank you." She mouthed back, "Family," and watched his expression soften into something that looked like love and gratitude and wonder all at once. The apartment in Arlington was smaller than the house they'd left behind, but serviceable. 2 bedrooms, one for Daniel and Lena, one for the kids to share temporarily until they figured out something better. The building was generic and corporate, the kind of place designed for short-term relocations, but Lena immediately started making it feel like home. She hung artwork the kids had made. She arranged their favorite books on the shelf. She made sure everyone's stuffed animals and comfort items were easily accessible. By the time they went to bed that first night in a strange city, the apartment felt less like a hotel and more like theirs. "You're a miracle worker," Daniel said, watching her tuck Mia in for the 3rd time, because Mia kept remembering one more thing she needed to tell Lena about her day. "I'm a former teacher," Lena corrected. "We're trained in controlled chaos." Still miraculous. The first week was brutal. The kids started at their new schools and came home overwhelmed and exhausted. Noah got in a fight with a boy who made fun of his accent. "We don't have accents," Noah insisted tearfully. "They do," and had to be picked up by Lena while Daniel was in meetings. Mia cried every morning before school, clinging to Lena and begging not to go. Evan, ever adaptable, seemed fine until bedtime, when he'd wake up screaming from nightmares about being lost. Daniel worked 18-hour days, leaving before the kids woke up and coming home after they were asleep. Lena knew this was temporary, knew it was necessary, but the weight of solo parenting 3 traumatized children in an unfamiliar city was crushing. She started looking for teaching positions, more out of desperation for adult conversation than immediate financial need. The interviews went well. Her credentials were solid, her experience relevant, but every job would start mid-year, dropping her into someone else's classroom, someone else's curriculum, someone else's mess. "Take the one at the elementary school in Fairfax," Daniel suggested one night during the rare dinner they managed to share. "It's closest to here, and the principal seemed to really like you." "It's a special education position," Lena said. "I don't have that certification. But you'd be good at it, and they're willing to train you." "Daniel, I can't add training requirements on top of everything else right now. The kids need stability. They need someone who's present." "They have me." Lena gave him a look that said exactly how present he'd been lately. He had the grace to wince. "It's just this phase. Once the initial setup is done, I know you've said that 3 times this week." She softened her tone, seeing the exhaustion in his face. "I'm not blaming you. This is your job. But I need you to understand that I'm drowning here, and taking on a full-time teaching position right now would pull me under completely." "So what do you want to do?" Lena stared at her cold dinner, at the dishes piled in the sink, at the homework scattered across the counter. "I want to be what they need. Right now, that's a full-time parent. The job can wait." "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Lena said, but she was smiling. The turning point came in week 3, during a parent-teacher conference for Noah. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, a different Mrs. Patterson than Evan's kindergarten teacher back home, which had confused everyone initially, had requested the meeting to discuss Noah's adjustment challenges. Lena went alone because Daniel was in Philadelphia for a site visit. Mrs. Patterson was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She got straight to the point. "Noah's struggling," she said, pulling out a folder of his work. "His academics are fine. He's actually ahead in most subjects. But socially and emotionally, he's shutting down. He doesn't engage with other students, doesn't participate in group work, and when I try to talk to him about it, he just shuts down further." Lena looked at Noah's assignments, saw the careful handwriting, the correct answers, the complete absence of any personality or creativity. He lost his mother 2 years ago, Lena said quietly. Car accident. And now we've moved him across the country, away from everything familiar. He's terrified of losing anything else. Are you his mother? Mrs. Patterson asked, and there was no judgment in the question, just curiosity. No, Lena paused. What was she? I'm his father's partner. I've been helping raise him for the past few months. Does he have a relationship with you? I think so. He talks to me sometimes, lets me help with homework, asked me to come to his science fair back home. Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. He mentioned you in his About Me essay, said you make good pancakes and you're teaching him to play chess. Lena's throat tightened. I didn't know he was paying attention to the chess. Children always pay more attention than we think. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. Here's what I'm seeing. Noah's a child who's experienced profound loss and is now in an environment where he has no control. He can't control where he lives, where he goes to school, who his friends are. So he's controlling the one thing he can, his emotions. He's locked them down tight because letting them out feels dangerous. How do I help him? Lena asked. Give him safe spaces to feel. Let him know it's okay to be angry about the move, sad about his mom, scared about the future. And most importantly, be consistent. Show up every day, exactly as you are. Children who've lost someone need to know that the people who remain aren't going anywhere. Lena left that meeting with a new understanding of what Noah needed. Not perfect parenting, not the right words, just presence. Consistency. The knowledge that she would be there tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. That night she knocked on the kid's bedroom door and found Noah reading in bed while his siblings slept. Can we talk? She asked quietly. He shrugged, which she'd learned meant yes. She sat on the edge of his bed. Your teacher says you're having a hard time. I'm fine. You're allowed to not be fine, you know. You're allowed to hate it here and wish we'd never moved and be mad at your dad for taking this job. Noah's hands tightened on his book. I'm not mad at Dad. Okay, but if you were, that would be allowed too. Silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. I miss home. Me too, Lena admitted. Noah looked up at her, surprised. Really? Really, I miss our house and our routines and knowing where everything is. I miss the coffee shop down the street and the park where Mia liked to play. I miss feeling like I knew what I was doing. But you wanted to come here. You said we should stay together as a family. I did, and I meant it, but that doesn't mean it's not hard. She reached out slowly and was relieved when Noah didn't pull away. We can miss home and still choose this. Both things can be true. I don't want to choose, Noah said. And suddenly he was crying, really crying, in the way he probably hadn't let himself cry since they'd arrived. I want Mom back, and I want our old house, and I want everything to be the way it was before. Lena pulled him into her arms and let him sob, this brave 9-year-old who'd been holding it together for so long. I know, she murmured into his hair. I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. It's not fair, Noah choked out. None of it's fair. You're absolutely right. It's not fair. You shouldn't have lost your mom. You shouldn't have had to move. You should get to be a kid who doesn't worry about whether the people he loves are going to disappear. Are you going to disappear? The question hit her like a punch. No, I promise you, Noah, I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Mom promised she'd be back and she wasn't. He was right. She couldn't promise immunity from accidents or illness or the 1,000 random tragedies that could tear families apart. You're right, she said. I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me. But I can promise that I will never choose to leave you. I will never walk away from you or your dad or Mia or Evan. I'm here because I want to be, and that's not going to change. Noah pulled back to look at her, his face blotchy and wet. Even though we're not yours? Even though you didn't choose to have us? I did choose you, Lena said firmly. Maybe not the traditional way, but I chose to be here. I chose to get on that plane. I chose to be your... She paused, the word catching in her throat. Our what? Noah pressed. Your mom, Lena said, and the word didn't feel too big anymore. It felt exactly right. If you'll let me. Noah stared at her for a long moment. Then he launched himself back into her arms and held on tight. Okay, he whispered. Okay. They stayed like that until Lena felt him start to relax, the tension finally draining from his small body. When she tucked him back in, he was already half asleep. Lena? He murmured as she reached the door. Yeah, bud? I'm glad you're here. She had to wait until she was back in her own room to let herself cry. Daniel came home 3 days later to find the apartment transformed. Lena had rearranged the furniture to create separate spaces for each child. She'd hung curtains to give them privacy. She'd set up a homework station and a reading corner and had somehow made the generic corporate housing feel like a home. How did you... He started, but she cut him off with a kiss. Later. Right now, I need to tell you something. They sat on the couch, and Lena recounted the conversation with Noah, with Mrs. Patterson, with her own realization about what these children needed. I'm their mother, she said simply. Not biologically, not legally yet, but in every way that matters. And I need to commit to that fully, which means I'm not taking a teaching job this semester. Maybe not next semester either. The kids need stability more than we need my income. Lena, I can't ask you to sacrifice your career. See, you're not asking. I'm choosing. She took his hands. I spent years trying to become a mother through fertility treatments and biological means, thinking that was the only way it could happen. And the universe had other plans. It brought me to you and Noah and Mia and Evan and gave me motherhood in a completely different package. I'm not going to waste that by being physically present but emotionally absent because I'm juggling too much. Are you sure? Daniel asked, and she could see the relief and guilt warring in his expression. I've never been more sure of anything. She paused. But I need something from you. Anything. I need you to trust me with them. Really trust me. I need you to introduce me as their mother, not your partner or their caregiver. I need you to support me when I make parenting decisions, even if they're different from what you would choose. I need you to let me be their parent, not just their babysitter. Daniel's eyes were suspiciously bright. Done. All of it. You're their mother, Lena. You have been since the day you chose to stay. Then I need one more thing. Name it. Marry me. Daniel's mouth fell open. What? You said someday you'd ask me to marry you. Well, someday is now, except I'm asking you. Lena's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to keep questioning whether this is real or whether I deserve it. I want to be your wife and their mother, legally and officially and completely. So marry me, Daniel Brooks. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her into his arms. Yes. Absolutely yes. Tomorrow if you want. Let's give it at least a few weeks, Lena said, laughing too. But soon, really soon. They told the children that weekend over breakfast, and the reactions were exactly what Lena had hoped for. Mia screamed and clapped and immediately started planning her flower girl dress. Evan asked if there would be cake, and when assured there would be, declared it the best news ever. Noah smiled, actually smiled, wide and genuine, and said quietly, Good. You should be official. They got married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at a park in Arlington. Daniel's parents flew in, along with his sister. Lena's sister Amy came from Seattle, bringing their parents from Florida. The children were there, dressed up and excited, and a handful of Daniel's colleagues who'd become friends. Rebecca Chen came too, bearing good news. Marcus signed the final agreement, she told Lena before the ceremony. Complete termination of all claims. You're free. Free. The word had never sounded so beautiful. The ceremony itself was simple. No elaborate decorations, no expensive venue. Just a judge, some folding chairs, and the people they loved. But when Lena walked down the makeshift aisle with Noah, Mia, and Evan at her side, because they'd insisted on walking with her, not just watching, she felt more complete than she'd ever felt in the expensive church where she'd married Marcus. Daniel's vows made her cry. Her vows made him cry. The children cheered, and when the judge pronounced them married, all 5 of them came together in a group hug that was chaotic and perfect and exactly what a family should be. At the reception afterward, just cake and punch in the park pavilion, Amy pulled Lena aside. "You look happy," she said. "Like, really happy, not pretending happy." "I am," Lena said, watching Daniel chase Evan around the pavilion while Noah and Mia argued over who got the biggest piece of cake. "I really, really am." "I'm glad. You deserve this." Amy paused. "I'm sorry I doubted it at first. Doubted him. You were protecting me, I get it." "Well, you don't need protecting anymore. You've got this whole fierce thing going on now. It's impressive." Lena laughed. "Fierce? Me?" "Yes, you. The woman who stood up to her abusive ex, who moved across the country for love, who just married a man with 3 kids and took on instant motherhood without blinking. That's fierce, Lena. That's brave." Maybe Amy was right. Maybe she was brave. Or maybe she'd just finally found something worth being brave for. The months that followed weren't perfect. Daniel's contract was extended. The 4 months became 6, became 8. The kids had rough days where they missed their old school and old friends. There were moments when Lena felt overwhelmed and underqualified and terrified she was screwing everything up. But there were also perfect moments. Noah making the honor roll and running to show Lena first. Mia's first loose tooth and the elaborate fairy door they built together for the tooth fairy to use. Evan finally learning to tie his shoes and the proud demonstration he performed for everyone at dinner. Daniel coming home early one Friday and sweeping Lena into a dance in the kitchen while the kids laughed. The 5 of them curled on the couch for movie night, arguing over what to watch and whose turn it was to pick. Bedtime stories that ran long because there were always more questions. Saturday morning pancakes that were definitely burnt, but everyone ate anyway. The slow, steady building of trust and love and family. One evening, about 7 months after the move, Lena was helping Noah with a school project about family trees. He'd been working on it for days, carefully mapping out branches and adding names. "Who do I put here?" he asked, pointing to a spot on the tree. "For you?" Lena looked at the chart. He'd put Daniel and Sarah as his parents, which was absolutely right. But now he was creating a separate branch, and he wanted to know where she fit. "What feels right to you?" she asked. Noah thought about it. "I could put stepmother, but that feels wrong. You're not like the evil stepmothers in stories." "I should hope not. Or I could put bonus mom. That's what my friend Jake calls his dad's wife. That works." "But it's not quite right either." Noah chewed his pencil, thinking hard. "You're just mom. That's what I call you now. That's what Mia and Evan call you. So maybe I should just put mom?" Lena's vision blurred with tears. "Noah, but I don't want to erase my first mom. She was important." "She was incredibly important," Lena agreed. "And she'll always be your mother, but you're allowed to have 2. You're allowed to have Sarah, who you loved and lost, and me, who's here now. Both can be true." Noah looked at his family tree, then carefully wrote in 2 branches. On one he wrote Sarah, mom, deceased. On the other, he wrote simply, Lena, mom. "There," he said, satisfied. "That's my family." Lena couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just hugged him tight. That night, she showed Daniel the finished project. "He put you as mom," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "He did. And Sarah, too. He didn't erase her. No, he made room for both of us." Lena leaned against Daniel's shoulder. "I never thought I'd be a mother. I spent so long believing my infertility meant I'd failed at something fundamental. But maybe this was always how it was supposed to happen. Maybe I was meant to mother children who needed me, not children I gave birth to." "They did need you," Daniel said. "We all did. You saved us, Lena. That night at the bus terminal, when we stopped, I almost didn't. I almost walked past because it was late and the kids were tired and it would have been easier. But Mia saw you and wouldn't let me leave. And thank heaven she didn't, because you saved all of us." "You saved me too," Lena said. "I was drowning and you threw me a rope." "We saved each other." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the streetlights through the window. "I heard back from the adoption lawyer," Daniel said eventually. Lena sat up. "And?" "She says the case is straightforward. Since Sarah passed and you're my legal spouse and the children want it, there shouldn't be any issues with you adopting them. We can file next month if you want. I want, Lena said immediately, more than anything. The adoption process took 4 months of paperwork and home visits and interviews. But finally, on a cold February morning, almost exactly 1 year after Lena had first met the Brooks family, they stood in family court and made it official. The judge was a woman who reminded Lena of her grandmother, warm and practical. Do you understand, she asked Lena, that by adopting these children, you're taking on all the legal rights and responsibilities of parenthood? That you'll be their mother in every legal sense? I do, Lena said. And Noah, Mia, Evan, do you want Lena to be your legal mother? Yes, Mia shouted, causing several people in the courtroom to laugh. Yes, Noah said clearly. Yes, and can we have cake after, like, at the wedding? Evan asked. More laughter. The judge smiled. I see no reason to deny this petition. Lena Moore Brooks, you are hereby granted full adoption rights and parental authority over Noah, Mia, and Evan Brooks. Congratulations to your family. The gavel came down, and suddenly Lena was a mother. Not in the way she'd planned, not in the way she'd once thought was the only way it could happen, but completely, legally, officially a mother. The children dogpiled her immediately, and in the chaos of hugs and happy tears, Lena heard Daniel say, I love you. Oh, I love you too, she said. All of you, so much. That night, after celebrations and yes, cake, after the kids were finally asleep and Daniel had crashed from exhaustion, Lena stood in the bathroom looking at herself in the mirror. She looked different than she had a year ago. Not physically, though there were smile lines that hadn't been there before. But her eyes were different, brighter, more certain. She thought about that woman freezing to death in a bus terminal, so convinced of her own worthlessness that she'd been ready to let the cold take her. She thought about Marcus's cruel words, about years of feeling broken, about the endless cycle of treatments and failures and grief. And she thought about where she was now. Mother to 3 incredible children, wife to a man who loved her exactly as she was, building a career helping other women rebuild their lives after divorce. She'd started volunteering with a women's shelter, using her experience to counsel others, and it had become her calling. She'd found her place. Not in spite of her infertility, not around it, but in a way that made it irrelevant. Because worth wasn't about what you could produce. It was about what you could give, what you could create, what you could build. And Lena had built a family. Not through biology, but through choice, through showing up every day, through love that was fierce and messy and completely real. A knock on the bathroom door startled her. Lena? Mia's sleepy voice. I had a bad dream. Can I sleep with you? Of course, baby. Lena opened the door and found all 3 children standing there in pajamas. We wanted to have a family sleepover, Noah explained, to celebrate. On our bed? Lena asked, though she already knew the answer. Please. Evan gave her his most winning smile. They all knew Daniel's king-sized bed could barely fit 5 people, especially when Evan was a horizontal sleeper and Mia liked to take up as much space as possible. Okay, Lena said. But if anyone kicks me, they're out. The children cheered and tumbled into the bedroom, somehow managing to wake Daniel, who groaned but made room without complaint. They arranged themselves into a pile of limbs and warmth, and Lena found herself in the middle with a child on each side and Daniel's arm around all of them. This is ridiculous, Daniel murmured, but he was smiling. This is perfect, Mia corrected. And lying there, surrounded by her family, her chosen, built from broken pieces, perfectly imperfect family. Lena had to agree. This was perfect. She'd spent so long thinking she needed to be fixed, needed to be made whole through biology and babies and the traditional path to motherhood. But she'd been whole all along. She just needed to find the people who could see it. And now, lying in a crowded bed in a temporary apartment in a city that was slowly becoming home, with 3 children who called her mom and a husband who loved her fiercely, Lena finally understood what she'd been searching for all those years. Not the ability to create life, the courage to choose it. She'd chosen life that frozen night at the bus terminal, when she'd accepted help from strangers. She'd chosen it every day since when she'd stayed instead of running. She'd chosen it when she'd let herself love these children, when she'd said yes to being their mother, when she'd built a future from the wreckage of her past. And that choice, that daily, difficult, Beautiful choice. Had given her everything she'd ever wanted, just not in the package she'd expected. I love you guys, she whispered into the darkness. A chorus of sleepy, love you too, came back, and Lena closed her eyes, finally, completely at peace. She'd been thrown out by her husband for being infertile, discarded like she was worthless. But a single dad CEO had asked her to come with him, and in doing so, had given her the world. Not because he'd fixed her, not because he'd made her whole, but because he'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. And together, they'd built something beautiful. They'd built a family. And Lena, once broken, once hopeless, once convinced she had nothing to offer, had learned the greatest truth of all. Love multiplies. It doesn't divide. And there's always room for one more at the table, especially when that one more is exactly where they're supposed to be. The end.